Welcome to my interviews for the book. Please enjoy and thank you. So, we are actually here to record a session and an interview for my upcoming book. When people are going to watch this recording, it's probably going to be out already. And we're going to talk today about soft skills. As part of the book, I'm interviewing friends and people I work with, not just celebrities that I know from the LinkedIn. I actually want to hear from people that I had the experience and the pleasure working with. You and me been working together for probably 15, 14 years, I guess.
Something like that.
I think like that. So before we go to soft skills, please tell me about yourself and what do you do now?
Thank you. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited for the book to come out and learn so much from you, even though I've learned so much from you already. So my name's Ira Goldstein. I'm the founder and CEO of Kernel Advisory. We're a cybersecurity advisory firm focused on M&A advisory and virtual CISO security consulting.
Great. So this is very interesting part because in many parts we have brilliant people. We have very smart engineers, very smart salespeople as well. But to get to the customer, to get to the person that listens to you, you need to kind of break the barrier because everybody has some kind of a barrier. And now we have a virtual barrier because even this conversation we're doing over Zoom, and probably 6 years ago, we will do it face to face. I think we call it soft skills. But I want to ask you, what is soft skills for you? How you define it?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is emotional intelligence and empathy. And maybe this is a prerequisite to having soft skills or to developing your soft skills. But if we think about what is the core of a soft skill, which really is, how does it compare to a hard skill? So a hard skill would be something that I learn, like a technical skill, a capability that I have that because I've learned it and mastered it or become an expert in it or have experience in it, it means I can do it, I can implement it. A soft skill is something that you can't really necessarily just read a book or learn it and be great at it. You have to practice it. You have to understand what's behind the person that you're basically interacting with in order to be great at the softer side of things, which is really interacting with people. And as I said before, emotional intelligence and empathy. So practically, what does that look like? It means empathizing with the person you're talking to. So putting yourself in their shoes. What do they want to get out of the conversation we're having? What is their day? Maybe what are the things that they think about and what is their life experience and how is that different from mine? And how should I change the way that I communicate or the approach that I have to meet that person where they are, as opposed to just optimizing for my own world and putting information out there and trying to get what I want done without thinking about who's on the other side.
That's a very, very good explanation. Now, how essential soft skills in your practice right now, you practice before when we work together, where did you find this is prerequisite, how important it is in consulting sales?
Well, I think it's fundamentally important in life. There are certain people who maybe have jobs or are so wealthy that they don't need to care about soft skills because if you don't really care about what other people think of you or you don't need anything from anybody else, I think we all know types of people who just don't necessarily have that type of empathy. But for everyone else in this world, it's critically important. I think in the past, if I think back to earlier in my career, I was always very comfortable empathizing with people and working with people. Many of the engineers that I worked with in the early days, security engineers who became good friends of mine, maybe had a harder time getting their point across, communicating, connecting with the people that they were working with, whether it was their clients or their bosses. And so I found early on in the work that I was doing, which was more managing security implementation projects, that it was important for me to bring a lot of soft skills to the table because the engineers who were on my team didn't necessarily have those. And so we worked very well together as a team if I was the front to the customer and they had a lot of the hard skills, which were actually configuring the security tools or security architecture. An added benefit to that was that I learned hard skills from them. They learned soft skills from me. And so really, I think any type of business to business relationship that you have, soft skills are fundamentally important, especially when you're in a services business and a consulting business. Everyone needs to have them. But as your company grows and as the work that you do grows and the size of the team, there's definitely room for people who don't have soft skills to make a huge impact. If you are a great developer who is really focused on their craft and has a very clear playground within which to work and to deliver their work, they may not need as many soft skills as someone who's a customer success lead who spends their entire day speaking with customers. So it really depends on the role and the place you are in your career as to what degree of soft skills you need in order to be successful.
This is expression that we all know that it says it's easier said than done. So we say how important soft skills, but it's not like a go read a book. As you mentioned, you need to actually do it. So how is one develop soft skill?
I think practice makes perfect, and making yourself uncomfortable is very important. So what I mean by that is, I think it's like public speaking. The first time you do it, or maybe every time you do it and you prepare for a talk and you do public speaking, it's natural to get nervous. But if you do it more and more, you get less nervous over time. There's always some amount of nervousness, I think, for most people. But the more you practice it, the more you get comfortable in your own skin, the more you develop tools and tricks in order to deal with any issues that may come up along the way. And I think soft skills is the same way. You need to be comfortable speaking up in a meeting of your own staff, for example, before you're comfortable speaking up in front of a client. So you have to take baby steps. So when I say practice is important, people may be worried about practicing their soft skills in front of a client or in a business scenario because they're worried about failing. What's a way to mitigate against that potential failure? They have to speak up in a team environment, speak up in a safe space with someone that they know, and experience that interaction and get feedback from people that they trust and know so that they can try it out when it comes to a business to business relationship. So I think that's really important, practicing. Also, finding people who you think are great at having great emotional intelligence or soft skills. There's always those people where you say, wow, that person, you get the sense that they really understand where someone else is coming from, or they're really great in front of clients, or their communication skills are really excellent. You should try to learn from those people and figure out how they did it, because it wasn't that they came out of the womb and were already great at soft skills. Everybody has a set of experiences which sets them up to be great at whatever they're great at today. And that could have been public speaking when they were younger. It could have been being put in an uncomfortable position in a classroom or educational setting, and that forced them to become great at that. Or maybe they were bullied as a kid, and so now they understand what it means to be hurt, and therefore they have really strong emotional intelligence. So I guess the other tip I would have would be find someone who you think is great at that and seek to learn from them.
Now, like seriously, like 5 different questions I want to ask you. Okay, but we'll try to go one by one. You just mentioned in the end, find somebody great to learn from. In your experience, can you maybe name someone, or what did you learn earlier in your career that help you with soft skills?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of the great people that I've learned from over the years. And I mean, first of all, it all starts with your family. Depending on what family dynamic you have in your own household, I grew up in a household that was very vocal, and the dinner table was full of opinions, and everyone was encouraged to speak up and say what they thought. And when everybody says what they think, that leads to conflict, healthy conflict where people disagree. And understanding disagreement and how to deal with disagreement and with someone seeing the world differently than you is the first prerequisite. It's that first step of empathy and emotional intelligence that will lead you to great soft skills. So I have to give some credit to my family, to my parents and my siblings for unknowingly training me in that. And then I think about early experiences. I think everyone has teachers probably in their life that influence them in certain ways. And I won't call out any specific ones, but I think in many of the different schools in my elementary school days and then into high school, I had great experiences where teachers would challenge me and the class to think differently and to not just take what we were learning and what was written in the book as the truth, but to really develop critical thinking skills. And again, it's all a map that leads you back to understanding someone else's perspective, which is the foundation here. So I would say it's probably family and teachers that were most influential to me. From a business perspective, if you're in engineering, in the kind of business that we're in, there's two main camps of people. There's people who do sales and there's people who do engineering. I know it's more complex than that, but really you can boil everyone down to that. Everyone is in sales to some degree, but you know what I mean? There's people whose main jobs are sales and those who are in engineering. I think we grow up having a negative association with salespeople. You think of a used car salesman, someone who tries to trick you into buying something that is of low value. You never want to be, I would never look up to people like that. But people who are great at sales, they're finding the right customer for the solution that they're offering, or vice versa. They're finding the right solution for what the customer's needs are. They have amazing empathy. They understand the customer's needs. They understand the person, that everyone buys from a person. And you're not just buying, a company isn't buying from a company. A person is buying from a person. They understand those people's needs. And so I've really learned from a lot of great salespeople that I've worked with over the years who have mastered that type of understanding and empathy, which has led to them having great soft skills.
You mentioned something interesting about connecting to the other person, to actually listen and understand what they want, being in their shoes. I think in some cases, people have this idea that when people say soft skills, if people say trying to connect to other person, like we are faking. We're trying to fake what the other person wants. We're trying to put a fake smile. We're trying to please the other person. And I don't think it's the case. If you wanna connect to other person and you want to be genuine and you want to actually understand what they want, you need to care. You need to care because if not, then you become this used car salesperson. And this is maybe the difference between different people on the level of great and good. But I'm wondering, what do you think about faking and actually care about what you're doing?
Yeah, there are some people that genuinely care about others and what they think. Or there's many people who are like that. And I think we all have that in us. Part of being a human is being interested in other humans and the great feeling it gives us to interact with others. And I'm personally a very curious person about the world. So I love talking to new people and understanding what their world is like and hearing about their challenges. But to your point, it's also can be uncomfortable and draining to talk to people if that's not something that you're comfortable with. And so my suggestion is not to fake it, but everyone needs to be a little uncomfortable in order to grow. You're never going to grow as a person if you're perfectly comfortable all the time and just doing only the things that you want to do. You will be at the status quo for your life. And who wants that, really? When you think deep down inside what you want with your life, nobody wants to be at the status quo. So how do you grow as a person? How do you get to the goals that you want to get to? You have to make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, or sometimes a lot uncomfortable. And that might mean not faking it, but engaging in things that make you uncomfortable, like asking people how they're doing, even if you think deep down inside, I don't really care how this person is doing. But you have to realize that part of you getting what you want, or you being successful, or you being happy, is interfacing with other people and understanding what makes them tick. And so I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, I'm excited to make myself uncomfortable and ask all these people these random questions in order to find out what makes them tick. But think about what your job is, what's important to you in your life. Obviously, part of that is working within a community, working within a family, working with other businesses. And so my answer to your question is you have to make yourself a little bit uncomfortable. It's not faking it if you genuinely are trying to make yourself better or genuinely trying to understand the other person. It may feel like you're faking it at the beginning, but the more you practice and the more you make yourself comfortable with it, then it's really you and you're not faking it anymore.
Your soft skills, how they change from before COVID and with COVID. And what I mean by this, again, before COVID, there was no idea of first meeting over Zoom. Maybe going to be a call, maybe a WebEx, like from once in Blue Moon, but majority will fly to Boston, we'll fly to Florida, we'll come to Toronto. We have this first meeting, and then we see everyone, we see the gestures, we see how what they do. Now everything is basically Teams, Zooms, whatever it is. What's changing the soft skills approach because it's different than physical room?
Well, I think we used to live in a colder world in some ways. And maybe soft skills, on one hand, soft skills were more important before COVID. Let's talk about virtual first and then physical. To your point, if I tried to have a virtual meeting with someone and I either hadn't met them before or I hadn't seen them in a long time, the world was a bit colder then, I think, in that it was all about let's get down to business. Let's use our time really wisely. And why are we here? Why am I talking to you? What do you want from me? That type of thing. Whereas virtually post COVID, or in the COVID time and post COVID, a norm developed where we actually started caring about how other people were doing. Are you sick? Is your family sick? Do you know anybody who's impacted? How are you coping mentally, physically? So I think interestingly, all of our soft skills actually got automatically upgraded as part of COVID. because we started caring more about other people because we were, as a world, experiencing something collectively that we could all relate to. Because everyone, regardless of race or country or whatever, everyone kind of got, I mean, the people in certain countries and certain areas were impacted more than others, but broadly, we all were impacted by it. So we could identify with each other. So I think in some ways, soft skills were upgraded based on COVID. They then became even more important when the primary interaction was virtual. So I think that's obvious when you're talking to somebody on a screen, it's much harder to make a connection with them. But then it also accelerated or increased the importance of in-person communication because it became so much scarcer and rarer. So we have this huge bump in travel now, both business travel and personal travel, because everyone is wanting that human interaction. And so for a lot of people, I think it was a net positive. It upgraded people's understanding and importance of soft skills. But for those people in the world who are introverts, who didn't like talking to people anyway, COVID was also great for them because they had the ability to sit at home and do their work on a computer and really not talk to anybody in person. Looking back on the past several years, though, it's not healthy for humans to be by themselves and to be isolated in that way. And I think we've learned that. And so I think we're coming back to an equilibrium and coming back to a balance where that will start to balance itself out in these post-COVID years.
You mentioned communication when we spoke about soft skills before. And I think when we say communication, we think about verbal skills, how we talk, if it's high pitch, low pitch, whatever it is. But I think communication is much more. Could be different ways of communication. Tell me more about what you think, what's communication mean, and what type of communication can be in soft skills.
Well, I think we've all heard and know that nonverbal communication is a huge percentage of interacting with anybody. That means different things in the virtual and physical world. So how do you look somebody in the eyes across a screen? It's kind of hard. Or how do you let them know that you're looking them in the eyes? It's harder to connect with nonverbal communication when you're ahead on a screen, in my opinion. Many companies have tried to fix that. I mean, you have reactions on Mac OS, you have even some platforms that help with digital nonverbal communication so people can tell others how they feel. For me, nothing beats in-person communication, being able to really look at somebody's face, interact with them, see how they're doing, seeing how they're carrying themselves. Because you can learn a lot about how a person's doing, how their day is, whether they're tired, what they're going through when you see them in person. So for me, virtual will always be worse because of that. Virtual is so efficient and you can do so much work back to back in a virtual world. But I think it's important for everyone to have that balance so that they can understand the nonverbal cues that are coming from the person they're talking to.
This is an important topic you mentioned right now, back to back. During the physical meetings, we will drive from meeting to meeting or walk from meeting to meeting. But basically, we had at least half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour between the meetings. So we can do 2, 3, 4, probably not more than 4 meetings a day. But we had time between the meetings to kind of decompress a bit, think about a meeting. Now you're jumping from one to another, one to another, one to another. So you can have 8, 9 meetings a day, maybe even 12 if they're half an hour meetings, easily. How do you keep the energy? How do you actually have the smile? How you become real on meeting number 7 and you don't bring the bad call from meeting number 6 to meeting number 7?
I think it's a unique skill, but it's not a great skill. You don't want to have that skill because your body and your mind tells you when it's too much. And I think you can go back to back meetings, 6, 7, 10 meetings a day and smile all the way through and deliver and be interested and be interesting and deliver on your work. But what you're doing is you're writing all of your information to short-term memory and you're not writing any of your data to long-term memory. Just in the sense of computer memory, think about if everything was in short-term memory, eventually it's going to be wiped, it's going to go away, the cache is going to get too full, the whole thing's going to crash, and then all of a sudden you have none of this written to long-term storage. That is exactly what happens. I've done many of these days and I don't like doing them and I'm trying to avoid doing them. Sometimes I have to, but the only way to battle against that is you need to have your own strategies and your own processes to let things sink in, to consider things and to write them to that long-term memory. Otherwise it's a waste. Yes, you've checked the box and had the meeting with that person and maybe done the job in those 30 minutes that you were meant to do. But who goes to a meeting for 30 minutes for the sake of those 30 minutes? Nobody. Or maybe like 70, 80% of your meetings are not like that. Maybe 20 to 30% are. But for me, 70 to 80% of the things that I'm doing are in service of a bigger goal that's going to happen after the meeting, whether it's some deliverable, some project, some relationship. And so, are you really moving the ball forward by meeting with someone for 30 minutes? If it's the 11th meeting out of 12 that you have in a day, and you can't commit anything to your bank of long-term memory where you're actually doing the hard analytical work, I think it's bad for you. It's bad for your clients. It's bad for your family. I know it's really hard to avoid, and I struggle with this as well, but you have to take a step back in order to do great work and give yourself time to consider, analyze, and download all of that data into your long-term storage.
In a way, we kind of came to the meat and potato of the conversation. And I think this is what the ultimate question. We have this term called rapport. How do we build the connection with someone on a call? So there's a difference between physical meeting and the meeting over a virtual meeting. But what do you do? So you're jumping on a call with the potential customer, with the customer, with basically it's a first call. You need to build this connection to move it to the more technical or sales part. What do you do? What is your process?
Well, I think building rapport is about having respect for the person that you're meeting with and the time that you're spending with them. So if I'm meeting someone new that I've worked hard to get a meeting with, or maybe they were introduced from a friend or colleague of mine, how do you show respect to somebody that is taking their time to meet with you? You could do one of two things. If you're in 20 back-to-back meetings and you're completely overwhelmed, you're not really prepared for this meeting. And you get on the call, you can still be a nice person, and you can build rapport by asking them about themselves and by learning how they're doing and by setting the stage for the first 10, 15 minutes before you get to the ask or the work that you're working on in the call. That's completely fine. And I think a lot of people do it that way. And I do sometimes too. Sometimes just the nature of a meeting is you haven't done a lot of prep work or you haven't had time to consider who you're meeting with. We're all busy. But I think showing respect to someone that you're meeting with and concurrently building great rapport with them is by doing the work ahead of time. Who am I about to meet with? Where do they live? I mean, open source intelligence, search the internet, LinkedIn, like where are they? Where do they live? Are they in the same time zone as me? What's happening in that part of the world at this moment? Do they post on social media? Do some research. And I know a lot of people already do this, so it may be obvious what I'm saying, but be well prepared so that you can get to the heart of the matter quickly because it shows respect for these people. Like, yes, everyone wants to do their introduction. It's helpful to hear somebody's introduction in their own words. But if I'm a busy person and you're a busy person and someone's meeting with you for the first time, would you rather tell them, spend the first 15 minutes of the meeting telling them the 10 things about you that they can read on the internet? Or would you rather they already know that, they've thought about it, they've considered it, how it applies to them, why it's important to them, and they come to you and say, Evgeniy, you've had a really interesting career. I really respect the type of work you've been doing. You've built this media empire. Tell me really specifically, I'm really interested in, I've had a hard time building a presence online. Evgeniy, you've done such a great job of this. What do you think is a great strategy in order for someone who has a background in technical security and controls implementation to start to bring their knowledge to people in a community or build a community on the internet? Obviously, if someone asks you that question within the first 5 minutes of a call, you're going to be much more excited to talk to them than if someone says, so tell me about your first job out of the Army. Tell me about what it was like to work at Checkpoint. I mean, maybe that's interesting too, but so building rapport is about having respect for the person you're meeting with and doing the work ahead of time so you can have a meaningful interaction with them.
Weak answer for your question, consistency. You have to be consistent and you just need to post and put information all the time. But we're monitoring you and me. You mentioned 5 minutes, 15 minutes. How much time you have with a person over a remote session to make an impact, to actually move the ladder to the next level?
Well, it can be very short. I think context is so important. How did you meet this person? How were you introduced? What level of information were you given before? I've had many times where someone I trust introduces me to someone. They ask me first. They say, hey, I've got someone that I want you to meet. I think it would be interesting for them. I think it would be interesting for you. Here's a bit about them. Here's what they care about. Here's the thing that they really want to talk to you about. When I have a meeting with this person, it's like we're off right away. We're getting right into it right away. And it's fantastic because there's a common connection there. So this person is vetted and we already know there's some legitimacy here. So we don't need to spend the beginning of the call dancing and thinking about, is this person someone that I want to open up to? Am I comfortable talking to this person? Do I need an NDA? I love that when I'm early on in a call and someone's, well, we could talk about this, but we need an NDA. Okay, I'm not stealing your trade secrets and going to make a competitive company based on this 30-minute call, but I understand why people sometimes want to do that. And so context is really important. That determines how much time that you need. But if you find that common ground, I think you can find common ground with someone pretty early on in the first 5 to 10 minutes of your interaction with them if you've each done the research and if you each come equipped. Sometimes it takes 15 to 20 minutes if you're doing introductions and going back and forth about, well, what's interesting to you and what common connections do we have. But then after that, to make the next level of meaningful communication where you think about what is something we could work on together or how can we support each other, that actually takes a lot longer. Like I found when I have an immediate connection with somebody and we both align very quickly that there's something we could work on together, we sometimes need 2 or 3 hours subsequently after that, another hour, another hour, another hour, because we find ourselves talking about so many different things and really rounding out our understanding of each other's world so that we can find the thing that we work on together. So the really quick summary of that is if you have good context and good preparation, you only need sometimes 10 to 15 minutes to really make a great connection with someone. But if it is a great connection, going deeper than that, I think takes hours, and really 30 minutes is never enough for someone that you want to have a really deep and contextual conversation with.
Thank you. What I learned is you cannot just have a connection and stop there. You have to always bring it up. Basically, you have to bring value all the time. You cannot just bring value once, check, and continue. You need to find ways to interact and bring value consistently, because people are going to lose traction in a way and interest until you get to the point that we're there, we're friends, we can kind of establish this part.
Well, we spoke earlier about faking it, and this may sound scary to people to say, well, I'm going to spend several hours with somebody. I didn't like the first 10 minutes of talking to this person and being uncomfortable. The only way you would spend that amount of time with someone is if you have such a common understanding of an issue or a common goal that you would enjoy doing that. So you can't fake the multiple hours. At the beginning, it's important to make yourself uncomfortable by opening up to people in an amount that is helpful to learn about them and for them to learn about you. But everyone has to think about something that they love and are interested in, even if it's comic books or sports or something that you do for work or some open source library that you help develop. And we're talking about making a connection with someone who's really interested in that too. And once you find that person, it may be uncomfortable in those initial moments when you're meeting people and you don't know if they're interested or not. When you find that person who was also a contributor to that open source library or who has a competitive project that is also open source and you both see the value of open source, I'm sure many people could imagine themselves going deep with those people and spending lots of time with them. So the faking it until you make it discussion earlier really only applies until you found something you're really interested in, and then it should come naturally to want to talk about that. And if it doesn't come naturally, then you got to find something more that you're interested in, and then it will come naturally from there.
Great. Ira, thank you very much. A lot of good feedback, a lot of good information, a lot of interesting things to think about it and develop your skills. So thank you for the chat today.
My pleasure. Thank you.